Hello and a warm welcome back to it. Day 3 here at the Investing in Africa Mining Indaba for 2025. And if you've just joined us, well, we're happy that you are on track as we continue with our series of conversations taking place here for the Transnet podcast series. Now, this is where we've had an opportunity over the last few days here at the Investing in Africa Mining Indaba to speak to a wide variety of the executives as well as the board chair of Transnet Group, giving us better perspective into the growth strategy of the organization. We've fully understood the shifts and changes that have taken place from a policy point of view, how that is translated into strategy. And of course, we're digging deeper now into understanding how this essentially shifts the operations within the company. Also taking a look specifically at a key theme that speaks to many of the stakeholder groups here being miners, and that's the efficacy of the locomotive environment, especially given some of the concerns we've seen in the past. But plans have been put in place, strategy is fully underway, and at the helm of Transnet Engineering, I am joined by the acting chief executive, Bessie Mabunda, to help us understand just exactly where we are in terms of driving growth. Bessie, such a pleasure to have you with us here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Exactly. We're excited to be here. There's still a hustle and a bustle that's taking place here at the Mining Indaba, and a great crowd and of audience of participants who are joining us here this morning. I can imagine you've been a very busy woman and in demand. And maybe we just need to contextualize why. Because Transnet Engineering plays a very critical role within South Africa's mining sector.
Yeah, Transnet Engineering provides a whole range of rolling stock solution as well as actually maritime services to the rail industry. So by and large, it's a big supporter in terms of moving freight in the country. So from a mining perspective, you would appreciate that most of the freight tends to be mining commodities in the first place. So really the role that Transnet Engineering plays is quite critical. This actually involves us ensuring that there is comprehensive solutions in terms of the maintenance and the manufacture of rolling stocks as well as associated components. We've done a lot of work in terms of collaborating with the OEMs to ensure that there is sufficient availability and reliability for rolling stock in order to move the mining commodities that do need to be moved in the country. But more than that, we've also provided direct services to some of the mining companies. So, for example, for companies like Sibanye, we've provided refurbishment of wagons as well as wheel repairs. We've also supplied things like brake block casts as well. We've also done a lot of work in terms of full life cycle maintenance for the Palabora Mining Company, which is PMC, from a locomotive as well as a wagon point of view. So really a lot of solutions that we provide to the industry in general.
I'm hoping you can take us deeper just in terms of understanding that. How have you capacitated yourself in order to ensure that this level of reliability is actually in place?
Yeah, so reliability and efficiency in rolling stock is critical because at the end of the day, having the numbers is not enough. You need to make sure that the numbers of rolling stock that are available is actually reliable and actually do the job that they are meant to be doing. So one of the key things from a principal point of view is that we then manage the rolling stock through effective rolling stock lifecycle management practices. And the biggest thing is collaboration and planning at a stage where we are making a decision as to what sort of volumes we are going to be moving in the next period. So you will then look at what type of rolling stock is actually needed, what are the quantities of rolling stock that are needed across the country. And then, of course, do an assessment in terms of the condition and therefore the interventions that are required. So some rolling stock will now be coming due for general overhaul programs, some for major overhaul programs, some will just be going through normal routine maintenance. You have to plan it very carefully because every time you take out rolling stock from operations, it means that piece of rolling stock is not available to move volumes. So you can't just do it haphazardly. So there has to be very clear programs as to when we take out rolling stock, and the speed at which we work on the rolling stock and release it back to service is also quite critical. But also ensuring the quality of work that we do so that when the rolling stock has been released, it does not have secondary failures. And then you can go back and contribute to moving freight. So those are quite critical things. So I think one of the other things is that as much as in life you want to plan everything, it will be great if all maintenance services were all planned. But there are events that are unfortunately outside of our control. There's issues of collision, there's issues of derailments, and moreover, the worrying issues around the security things where there is unwanted theft and vandalism of locomotives, which unfortunately does a lot of damage. So those are unplanned maintenance interventions that we have to then stop and make sure that those are also dealt with in order to release locomotives back for service.
And I think that's a very important point that you mentioned, because we have heard some of the sentiments being shared by the likes of Sonny, who takes care of operations at Theo regarding the North Corridor. And I think this obviously calls for a heightened level of focus for key stakeholders to be aware of, that these are external factors that you have to contend with. And perhaps also gives us an opportunity then to speak to stakeholders for them to have a clearer understanding of how these assets need to be prioritized by all South Africans, whether in mining, whether in freight, even at maritime level, but just as interested and invested South Africans to really prioritize the safety and security of our assets here.
100% agree. The safety and security of infrastructure as well as assets such as rolling stock, it is not a problem of one entity. It is actually a country problem. And it's also a symptom of the widespread, to some extent, lack of respect for what infrastructure does actually for the economy and for the communities and even ourselves and our families. And that is quite an unfortunate trend. And that is something that requires collaboration across the board, whether you are talking about the police services, investigation units, talking about communities, even just the ordinary human being. This is a collective problem that needs to be solved.
100%. We'll talk about maritime in just a moment, but I'm really still intrigued on the mining aspect of things, especially given that we have key stakeholders in the mining environment here. As you've mentioned, Bessie, there's a number of interventions that you put in place, key partnerships to make sure that there's reliable access and, of course, the necessary rolling stock.
Yes.
Maybe just to have a clear understanding of the fruitful outcomes of these interventions you've put in place. Are you able to share a comparison for us as to perhaps how things were before and how the interventions you've now put in place have yielded positive results?
Yeah, so I'm not sure how well you know this. So we have a problem where there is what we call staged and long-standing locomotives. That number of staged and long-standing locomotives had grown to about 394 locomotives, and this was around May or so. These are new generation locomotives. New generation means that they are the newest. They also have the highest kilonewtons, so therefore the highest tractive effort.
Quicker, faster, more efficient.
Exactly, they pull more, you know what I mean? So if you have 394 of these that are long-standing and staged for a myriad of reasons, I mean, obviously, some of which we've just discussed around theft and vandalism, derailments, and so on, but also failure of key components that we unfortunately could not replace due to, obviously, other challenges, 1064 issues with the Chinese OEMs and so on. So, but a lot of work has gone in. So we introspected to some respect and understood that as Transnet Engineering, we could not do all of these things ourselves. So we have reached out, we have collaborated with the original equipment manufacturers. We had established very strategic long-term agreements with them to actually support us. So through all of these efforts, we've seen about 86 of these long-standing locomotives year to date being returned, and obviously we are working on more. So as as time goes, obviously we need to start working on the more difficult locomotives. So it does take a little bit of time, but there's definitely been a shift in the right direction with a lot more of the long-standing locomotives coming back online. But also from a procurement point of view, we have changed our approach. We were mainly doing tactical sourcing, but we've then shifted and we're now moving to strategic sourcing, long-term contract, consolidated type of contracting through the OEM so that we can then have higher negotiation power in terms of pricing, in terms of lead times, and so on. So overall, better support from our supply chain. So those are things that are starting to bear fruit right now.
That's refreshing to hear, because it does seem as though there's an ongoing partnership, right? And a reciprocal relationship in terms of opening up more of these opportunities. We've highlighted all the opportunities and partnerships and the benefits for the mining industry, but let's also talk about the maritime industry for just a moment, because Transnet Engineering plays a very critical role there too. And given the conversations we've been having with a few of your peers within the ports environment, it's become evident just how much more competitive we're trying to create in terms of a landscape to allow for enhanced collaboration. Yeah. What does it look like from TE's perspective?
So, TE traditionally has really been focusing on rolling stock and very much internal, which means that 90% of our revenue actually comes from Transnet Freight Rail. So we have seen benefit in expanding our services, not only externally in terms of supporting the SADC region, but also internally into the other operating divisions, hence the exciting move into the maritime space. So supporting both Transnet port terminals as well as Transnet National Port Authorities. So the things we do is mainly on the TPT side in terms of equipment, and mainly on the TNPA side is mainly in terms of infrastructure. But we've now even become an OEM in terms of equipment such as your trailers, as well as your haulers and skips. And we're actually working with an OEM right now to also establish OEM capability for straddle carriers. So we're doing a lot of things.
I should be saying more excitement. It sounds like growth, right?
This is my excited nervous face. So definitely a lot of goals, but not only those, but we also do component refurbishment. So there are components such as engines as well as motors, gearboxes and hydraulic systems and so on. So we do a lot of things. I mean, even from an infrastructure point of view, we do build staircases or refurbish those that need refurbishment, on automated mooring systems, on to ensure that the vessels are stable when they are on the ports. So so those are things that we do. It's really exciting, and that business has grown from where it started last year with about 114 odd million revenue to now we're looking at over 500 million in revenue, and we're hoping to grow that even further. So there's a lot of opportunity in terms of how far we can go in the port space.
100%.
Yeah.
Lots of growth opportunities, no doubt, as you allude to, and that growth typically needs to be capacitated with investment.
Of course.
What's TE's strategy here?
Investment in general, this is something that obviously from a Transnet point of view, we've been very clear that we have reached a point where we cannot do everything ourselves. So in generally, we are looking at investment in a myriad of spaces within the business. So you would have heard other colleagues talk about private sector participation, where we are hoping that private sectors can come in, collaborate with us, use their funding. We use our well-built, world-class capabilities, as well as the facilities that we currently have across the country for us to do more. So in the TE space, we currently looking at three possible spaces in which we can collaborate with private sector. The first one is around the legacy fleet. So we've got very old locomotives that are between 40 to 50 years old. Those locomotives need a lot of intervention. They need to be renewed. There needs to be new technology put in so that we can extend the life of those locomotives. So we are looking for partnerships in terms of that. People who can come in and even occupy our facilities, work with us to actually renew this fleet and keep it going for, another 10 years or even longer. That's the first part. The second one, we're looking in the space of foundry. So we use a lot of cast products in our manufacturing environment. And cast products, can be very difficult from a quality point of view. They require a lot of resources, a lot of energy. So that is something that we believe it's not really our core business. So we would like to therefore partner with people who do foundries and are more expert at foundries than we are, that could actually partner, take over some of the cast products that we do ourselves, and supply us the ones that we obviously rely on the market. So that's something that becomes very critical. And then the last one is the exciting one, which is the Trans-Africa locomotive. So we have our own locally built, designed, developed locomotive. It is a small locomotive. We affectionately know it.
Interested how it's been developed and innovated, and it
is, yeah, NTE, yeah. So the Trans-Africa locomotive, we currently have 3 units that are operating on the ore corridor. So it does short hauls. It's a very light locomotive, but it does a lot of work in the shunting space, at the tipplers, building up trains and so on. But that's a very innovative product that is wholly owned by us. So we definitely would like partnerships in that space to commercialize, to manufacture large scale, and make that locomotive available to the rest of the continent and maybe even beyond. If we find the right partner. It is a diesel locomotive, so it is one that can easily transition into, many different spaces on the continent.
100%.
Yeah.
That's important for growth. You've highlighted the collaborative efforts, but also the innovative solutions that are being brought by TE. We certainly have seen a lot of growth, and this speaks to the strategy that is being implemented by the business. But for any stakeholder who's listening, internal, external, someone who perhaps just wants to get clarity on the ongoing commitments from TE, what's your parting shot that you'd like to leave with us today?
Yeah, so I think for me, in the last while, there may have been a feeling that TE was a little bit closed and not necessarily open for collaboration and so on. I just want to say we are very much open for collaboration. We want to do a lot more. We want to expand our services and improve the products that we are already offering. So not only in the country, but in the region, the rest of the African continent, and elsewhere. So we want to do more. We are open for business, and we would like anyone who is interested to reach out. So they can reach out directly to ourselves at Transnet Engineering, or they can reach out through group business development, which obviously is our division that is more commercially outward focused. We also have an internal business development office within TE. So they are more than welcome to reach out. We can then engage. So we're really looking to rely a lot more on private sector collaboration to achieve a lot more for not only Transnet, but the freight logistics of the country, but the continent as well.
Exactly. And as you say, really opening up the opportunities for ongoing growth through collaborative efforts that you highlight. Sounds like you're open for business, Bessie. It's very nice.
So,
well, we wish you all the best, and certainly hope that in a year's time, when we sit down in conversation, that there'll be so much more growth that you'll be able to share with us. All the best.
I appreciate that, Google. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bessie Mabunda joining us as the Acting Chief Executive of Transnet Engineering and telling us more about the phenomenal opportunities that are in store for this operational division of the group. A big thank you for joining us for this episode. And of course, to those of you who have joined us on the sidelines, great to have your collaborative efforts too.